Well, folks, what a roller coaster ride we have had this year. It has been chaotic, possibly shambolic, but also what a journey for all the wrong reasons. It's now finally time to talk about Israel in the Eurovision Song Contest. Roll titles. Yes, good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. My name is Jamie Jew, and welcome to a video that, quite frankly, I was not expecting to make, but I feel given what happened, especially over the 10th and 11th of May, prior to the actual grand final, or more to the point, in between the second semi-final and the grand final of the Eurovision Song Contest, I felt I had to. Although one thing I should stress straight away before I even delve into it all, and that is I simply want to make an apology to the Eurovision community. And that apology is centered around my inclusion for thinking Israel should be part of the Eurovision Song Contest because I thought at the very least the song would be apolitical, or at the very least their approach to the Eurovision Song Contest would be non-political. However, given what we know of in terms of certain reports, what the Israeli delegation did at the Eurovision Song Contest, and given the context of how it all transpired throughout the entirety of the Eurovision Song Contest with Israel's participation, I got this one completely wrong, and yeah, shame on me. Obviously, numerous content creators and YouTubers, streamers, that kind of thing, obviously did not want to include Israel in their, even consideration of reacting to their video, analysing their music, etc., etc., and just did not want to include Israel on the participation list at all, unlike the EBU, who did, of course, allow Khan, the Israeli broadcaster, to participate in the contest. So, yeah, I got this one badly wrong, and for the final time ever, this will be, well, aside from another video I'm just going to do, which you can check out in the annotations in the top left of the video, whereby I'm analysing and reacting to all of the songs in terms of their finishing position in the grand final, and indeed going through the non-qualifiers for that matter. This will be the final time I will mention Israel, or indeed acknowledge Israel, in the Eurovision Song Contest. Which is a shame, really, because I know there's quite a few of you who do subscribe to my channel and indeed watch my stuff and watch my content that are Israeli. I should stress this is nothing to do with the Israeli citizens, or more to the point, people living in Israel, born in Israel, whatsoever. This is mainly my, not necessarily an attack, but more or less a protest against the Israeli government in what they are doing, which, quite frankly, in terms of the outer political world and what we certainly know of, with it being vastly reported of what they're doing against people in Palestine, is being vastly documented and acknowledged by the UN, NATO, and of course the, I've forgotten the body's name, but certainly the one that deals with human rights. It is disgusting, implorable, and downright vile of what the Israeli government and the military are doing. And quite frankly now, it's best if Israel is no longer in the Eurovision Song Contest. We'll get to all of that a little bit later, but first of all, I want to set the scene on how we got here in the first place. Though I should stress, I want to thank ESC Cat and ESC Gay for their respective broadcasts and indeed journalism throughout the entire Eurovision Song Contest, because ESC Gabe was A, at the contest, and B, boy oh boy did he experience a lot. And to ESC Cat, who was updating us constantly, even though she wasn't at the venue, she was getting reports left, right and centre, whether it was just a rumour or whether it was official. I'm going to try and at least broaden out to signify what I report as rumour and what indeed I report as fact, because at the end of the day, given what we know of, it's a bit limited. But let's date it all the way back to, of course, the 7th of October 2023, when Hamas, a Palestinian terrorist group, attacked Israel in implorable ways, and of course we know that was well documented, especially by Khan. But what has happened subsequently in terms of Israel's response is also downright disgusting. Since then, there have been countless reports of mass killings of innocent civilians, even dare we say genocide, by the Israeli government. Again, this is not an attack on the civilians, because I'm sure a lot of you civilians do not want Benjamin Netanyahu to actually be prime minister anymore. And I honestly feel genuinely bad for a lot of the Israeli civilians, because they did not want this. Nobody wanted this in the outside world. This is the last thing any of us expected. And of course, naturally, that came with it the contested issue of Israel being in the Eurovision Song Contest. Naturally, this would lead to a lot of people thinking that it would be a Russian-style basically outcast of Israel, whereby it has to be said eventually, the EBU did ban Russia from 2022 after their subsequent invasion of Ukraine, which they stated, as in the EBU stated, Russia's inclusion would bring the contest into disrepute. Keep that quote in mind later on. Then seemingly, kind of out of nowhere, though it has to be said unsurprisingly, Khan decided to do what's called a soft power move, whereby they decided to include the Hamas attacks in their song. This, of course, absolutely 100% categorically goes against the rules of the contest, especially when it comes to entering songs in the Eurovision Song Contest. Case in point, Georgia tried to enter We Don't Wanna Put In, which was a direct dig at Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2009, and consequently, the contest was held in Russia in 2009. So naturally, Georgia got banned. And of course, Belarus in 2022 also got subsequently banned when they tried to basically promote their style of politics in their song twice. In fact, what made the moment even more disgusting is the fact that the EBU allowed the initial, basically run of their song to be shown on the Eurovision channel, as in the Eurovision YouTube channel, and that got massively disliked. Thankfully though, the EBU did do the right thing and banned Belarus from the 2022 competition onwards. But now we fall into this category whereby Israel once again were doing a soft power move, and the EBU understandably were not having any of it. At the very least, that was the initial thoughts. The song initially was called October Rain and then was changed to, I think it was like Dance It or something like that. I can't remember the second title of the song, but all I'm going to say is that the EBU said on both of those types of songs, it promoted political messages from Israel, especially regarding the Hamas attacks of October 7th. So naturally, Khan and the EBU were at a standoff. EBU insisted Khan should change their lyrics or Khan would be disqualified. Khan initially refused to change the lyrics until a certain Netanyahu intervened. Yes, the Israeli Prime Minister actually intervened and said Khan should change the lyrics so they can participate in the Eurovision Song Contest. And actually, third time's the charm when it comes to this sort of situation, where Khan, at the very least, changed the lyrics to in some way not directly implicating the Hamas attacks on October the 7th. As we all know, the song was called Hurricane, and of course I did an initial reaction to it, which I will keep up on my channel in the future, though let me know in the comments if maybe perhaps I should delete it. Although in fairness, I have not even monetized that video whatsoever, nor indeed have I promoted myself on the channel for you guys to subscribe, so you know, it is what it is. But naturally, the song was of course called into question a little bit by a lot of people, although that being said, a lot of Israelis were certainly backing the song for all what it's worth, which it has to be said, I will say again, is a good ballad song. It's not a wow ballad song, but a good one nevertheless. However, simply because Israel were included in the competition, Palestinians everywhere were pissed. Understandably, Eden Golan, who represented Israel this year, did not attend any pre-parties in the lead up to the Eurovision Song Contest, which understandably was for the best. But that didn't stop thousands of Palestinians flocking to every single pre-party you can think of and protesting like it's no tomorrow. And naturally, they attacked certain artists who were more or less advocating for Palestinians to be free, or at the very least calling for a ceasefire, i.e. namely Ollie Alexander, who got the brunt of it. During his pre-party performance in London, he was naturally upset by the whole affair, and you can tell from that in his live performance that he did very nearly the end of the night, although that being said, it was about 1 AM when he did the performance. But unfortunately, people had to accept that Israel were in the competition, whether some people did like it or not. And as time flown by, well, we hoped things were going to be okay, and at the very least Israel were going to participate fairly, transparently, and at least be friendly with every single contestant there were in Malmö. But as we all know, yeah. Throughout the entirety of Eurovision week, the Israeli delegation, or more to point specific members of the Israeli delegation, were seen photographing and filming random members of the delegation without even acknowledgement nor indeed prior notice that they were going to be filmed, i.e. without their consent. Switzerland, Belgium and Greece's delegations were all in the firing line in regards to their subsequent non-consensual photographing and videos, to which also subsequently they did post a couple of things which were a little bit derogatory towards their, their particular act. But at the very least, some of them weren't as bad. unlike compared to one Bambi Thug for Ireland. She got the absolute brunt of the absolute complete discrimination from the Israeli broadcaster, as evidenced by their Israeli commentator during the semi-final one performance for Bambi.
רבים כחלק מהזהות הבינארית שלהם. הם גם מעדיפים להשחיר על ישראל. אולי נדבר על זה בהמשך. תכינו את הכללות.
She was, of course, oblivious to it at the time, but of course she was naturally getting photographed, videoed everywhere, and quite frankly, she was not having any of it. She, like many delegations, including that of Ollie Alexander of the UK, reported these issues, like also many of the journalists and other subsequent members of, everywhere around to do with the Eurovision Song Contest, reported these issues to the EBU because, at the end of the day, they broke the contest rules and regulations in regards to delegation's safety. Never mind the thousands upon thousands of police that turned up at the venue to make sure everything was safe in terms of a proper attack, but also, of course, making sure that the Palestinian protesters who were there to protest made sure that they did not enter the venue through, unforeseen circumstances. And police, for all of what it's worth, did a good job in making sure everything was fine in terms of anything physical happening, but in terms of anything mental happening, yeah. We'll touch upon what EBU's responses to all this was later on, but I do want to now mention the second semi-final because, of course, this is where Israel were participating. On the actual show itself, it sounded like there was a good mixture of, say, a couple of boos, but also a good amount of cheers according to the TV broadcast. Except that wasn't the case. As it turns out, in the arena, Eden Golan got Riley booed, especially during the end part of the song where she sung in Israeli. God, it was loud. This meant ultimately that we came to the conclusion that the Swedish broadcaster SVT was putting in fake applause to drown out the booing on Israel's performance, which, quite frankly, from SVT's point of view, is pretty dire. Of course, we've had fake applause before from Russia's performance in 2015, but that was slightly different in the fact that Russia were at least respectful to other artists in the arena and they were trying to come out with a good message, even though the audience were not buying it. But in this situation, you can understand why many, many members of the public in the arena were booing Israel. And I, for one, don't blame them. But here's the thing. A lot of us, as we already mentioned, expected Israel to obviously qualify for the grand final, but not really doing much. We expected it to be a bit of a mid-song, maybe around 12th to 17th, that kind of thing. We thought it would do okay with the jurors, okay with the public, nothing more. Only for Rai, the Italian broadcaster, to basically say, hold my televote. Straight after the qualifiers were announced on the live broadcast itself, Rai accidentally revealed their televote scores to the Italian public, and yes, this was real. It subsequently showed a lot of the scores in terms of the percentages of the vote to most of the countries were relatively low, in fact mostly in single digit percentages, except one, which was Israel, that got 39.3% of the vote, a virtual landslide. This, as a result, eked out a situation which was pretty dire to begin with to almost exploding. In fact, Israel were then second favourites to win the grand final because of this. Naturally, though, the rules stipulate that you cannot reveal the telephone votes prior to the grand final, but until they, of course, are officially released after the grand final in order to make sure everything is stayed above board and is fair for all countries participating. No one quite told that to our AI. Whoever the genius was who leaked, I say supposedly leaked, I mean, if you ask me, I think the accidentalness or the leakness of it all, yeah, it's a bit too convenient words for me. Call me a cynic and everything, but I honestly, genuinely do believe whoever released that is A, a genius, and B, possibly the biggest savior of the entire event. Because had we not known that, we probably wouldn't have expected Israel to A, get loads of televotes, which they eventually did, and B, potentially the jurors could have also upvoted them big time, and we would have had a serious disaster on our hands post the grand final. And just for context, yes, the actual televote results revealed Israel did get 36% of the total votes from the Italian public in the second semi-final, so those leaked results weren't too far away. And now comes the juicy bits that absolutely kicked off the chaos that we saw on Friday and Saturday. And yes, I know this video is about Israel, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to include the disqualification of the Netherlands in here because at the end of the day, they do provide some context of what was going on. But let's go through all of it in summary so at least we understand how it happened. First off, Joost Klein did indeed hide his face whilst Israel was speaking during the second semi-final qualifiers, basically press conference. The only time he ever interacted with the Israeli delegation was when she was asked as to whether her presence in the contest would bring about a lot of disruption and, of course, a lot of fear in the contest because of the heightened security threat. She was initially told by her team to not answer the question, only for Joost to say, "Hey, why don't you answer it?" or words to that effect. To be fair to Eden, she did answer the question in, I think, the fairest way possible, so fair play to her. Now, normally when it comes to Fridays and Saturdays, Friday sees 2 rehearsals. One normal rehearsal to give everybody a little bit of a upbeat, joyous moment. It's more of a relaxed nature, and the second rehearsal on Friday is the jury show. This is where things kicked off big time. Even though Joost Klein was there for the flag parade at the start of the first rehearsal on Friday, all of a sudden, his performance was completely skipped. There was no warning, no notification, there was literally just nothing in regards to why this was indeed skipped at all. Normally it would be a case of, say, maybe there was a technical glitch or something like that, and maybe he has to perform at the end, but there was literally nothing. Cue swarms of journalists in the press room, running around frantically, trying to find out what on earth happened. Only for then the story to break that Joost Klein had been involved in an altercation with what, as it turns out, was a member of the Swedish production crew. Initial reports suggested that, because I'm including this here, that rumours circulated that he actually punched or interfered or altercated with a member of the Israeli delegation. But I absolutely should stress at this point that it merely was just a rumour. It was not true, as confirmed by A, the EBU, and B, Avatros, the Dutch broadcaster, and indeed by Joost Klein himself. Because Joost Klein does suffer from a little bit of trauma for what he went through, especially because of the context of his song, and the fact he does suffer from a bit of anxiety when it comes to people approaching him, it was agreed with him, the Dutch broadcaster, Avatros, and the EBU to not film him after the whole performance has been done for his song, Europapa. However, it was blatantly clear that the EBU did not adhere to this promise and blatantly filmed him wherever he went, especially after his performance, to which Joost was not a happy man. Now, obviously, we don't know all the full details about this, so we can only speculate at this point, but I'd rather not speak about speculation since I'm not really that kind of person. But the main details we know of is that there was an altercation and that the Swedish police are now basically investigating the case and are kind of rushing the case also a little bit. But of course, naturally, we did not know any of this at the time, and so rumours speculated like complete wildfire. And as I already mentioned, the second rehearsal that day on Friday evening specifically, was the jury show. We didn't know whether Joost Klein was going to rehearse or not, or even perform during that particular show. The EBU did put out a statement on the first rehearsal that he was not rehearsing due to the altercation, but that's all we got. Naturally, crisis meetings were taking place prior to the jury show. Basically, it was a case of whether the Netherlands were disqualified or not. If the Netherlands were disqualified, then obviously they had to not perform in the jury show, which was basically the main thing that everybody was kind of agreeing what was going to happen. But alternatively, if he was not disqualified, then of course he would be performing, which was a little bit weird, but at the same time, he was a fan favourite, so people were hoping he was going to perform rather than not. And after so much speculation, come the jury show itself, or more to the point 20 minutes before the show started, there was this leaked graph that showed the Netherlands not only not on the board on the grand final, but also it showcased jurors 0 out of 36. In case you need a reminder, there were 37 participating broadcasters, or more to the point participating countries in the competition, so it sounded like Netherlands were completely disqualified altogether. And lest we forget, these were graphics that were put up by SVT, the broadcaster themselves hosting the contest in Malmö, Sweden, basically kind of summed up thinking, well, the EBU have just done the Netherlands dirty here, it seems. But then we got an announcement, or more to the point, a statement, basically during the rehearsal broadcast, that A, he was not disqualified, and B, his second semi-final performance would instead be used for the jury show, so therefore the Netherlands were, at the moment at the least, still in the competition, But again, they were only using the second semi-final performance. Just Clean was still not performing on the stage. However, weirdly, it seemed later after that particular afternoon, to which, by the way, Israel got even more boos, the subsequent after-party showcased that a lot of the Avatros delegation, or more to point, that particular Dutch delegation, were in the Euro party actually in quite buoyant mood. They actually had a lot of meetings with the EBU, and they said they were, for more to the for want of a better part of it, or for better words or context or whatever, they said they had productive meetings and they were happy that things were going to get resolved. At least it was the mood initially on Friday evening after the second rehearsal. And even though on the following morning on Saturday, the 11th of May, grand final day, it seemed the Netherlands were going to participate because their flag was put up in the little press box or the little delegation box that they got, it subsequently turned out 15 minutes later the Netherlands were officially disqualified from the grand final. Obviously, I would read the press statement, but this video is long enough as it is, so we haven't got all day, so I'd rather just get on with the basics. But briefly touching back on Friday, because of the amount of chaos and uncertainty that completely transpired, completely out of nowhere it seems, two significant factors happened when it came to the artists trying to maintain some sort of peace and unity. One of which turned out to be quite good, the other one kind of a bit cringy. I'll touch upon the cringy one first in the fact that Angelina Mango, the Italian representative singing La Noia, decided to come to the press room and sing an a cappella version, albeit with guitar, of Imagine by John Lennon. I mean, look, the good idea on paper, just not that well executed. But what was executed pretty well, actually, has to be said, was Slimaine's performance during basically the third rehearsal prior to the grand final night itself, i.e. on Saturday afternoon, the so-called family show. He, representing France, had a little bit of an a cappella moment in his song, which he of course wanted to do so thanks to the love he got from the pre-parties, but instead of singing it, he decided to use it for a speech.
We need to be united by music, yes, but with love, for peace. United by music, yes, but with love, for peace. Thank you so much.
It went down extremely well, and indeed you could hear most of the speech as it is anyway, even though there was some reports of his mic being turned down or something like that, but if I'm honest with you, you could still hear him for the most part anyway, so I don't think that's much of an issue. So yeah, Saturday came around, the news came around, and boy oh boy, it was absolute anarchy. Because of the whole situation surrounding the Netherlands, it led to a lot of the artists, as aforementioned already, Switzerland, Belgium, Greece, UK, Ireland, and I think a couple of others, including Portugal, deciding to absolutely hammer the EBU with complaints, especially regarding Israel's delegation, completely just harassing the amount of people they did during the Eurovision week. ESC Gabe touched upon this, and he even himself made a complaint about it, to which it has to be said he did not get a reply of from the EBU. It was acknowledged, but it wasn't replied to in terms of the actual outcome. So the EBU turned something into what was basically a bit of a show into an absolute catastrophe by implementing the Streisand effect. If you don't know what it is, just Google it. It's a good read. To make things even worse, both Alessandra and Karia, who were going to be the spokespersons for the jury during the grand final, both pulled out because of the whole situation. And Nikki de Jager, who was supposed to be the spokesperson for the Netherlands jury, also cited to pull out herself with no suitable replacement. In fact, they wouldn't even announce the points at all. That would be down to just one individual who... Yeah, we haven't touched upon him just yet, so we might as well talk about the even more face elephant in the room. And that was, of course, the EBU Executive Supervisor, Martin Osterdahl. He was not there whatsoever during any of the rehearsals, for his little piece to camera things, his so-called good to go speech, as I'm sure you're all familiar with by now, simply because, obviously, he was in crisis talks with a lot of delegations regarding Israel's participation, and, of course, subsequently, the Netherlands disqualification. And just to ride it home, whoever was replacing him to do the whole good to go thing was Riley booed during those rehearsals, because at the end of the day, they are directing the boos to the EBU as much as Israel. So when the actual show came around for the grand final, well, boy oh boy, we were expecting a little bit of chaos and, well, we kind of knew what was going to happen in regards to certain aspects of the whole entire show. We'll touch back upon Martin in a minute, but let's briefly mention back to Israel in the fact that again, they got Riley booed during the televised Saturday Night Live performance. But even though it has to be said, Israel did get Riley booed from most of the Eurovision audience, aside from the 1 or 2 Israelis supporting them, those boos were nowhere near loud or rile enough for Martin Osterdahl when he was taking the mic to make his piece to camera. The amount of boos for Martin when he was announcing that the jury results were good to go, well, just have a listen.
Yeah, good evening.
Crowd have turned on Martin. Some of the crowd not happy with the EBU this year, and Martin's the face of it, so he's getting that response.
To make things even worse for Martin, he also had to deliver the Dutch jury results, and well,
12 points from the Dutch jury.
I will say, though, that I almost feel kind of sympathetic towards Martin Osterdahl here, because at the end of the day, he is the face of the EBU, and the EBU completely and utterly screwed everything up in regards to whatever decisions they were making towards the entirety of the 10th and the 11th of May. And well, yes, he is the face of it, so naturally they're going to direct the boos, or more to the point, the audience is going to direct the boos at him, which at the end of the day, he does represent the European Broadcasting Union. Notice I said almost feel sorry for him. So yeah, naturally, I do believe that every single person who made those decisions, especially when it comes to the EBU Director General Noel Curran, I believe his name was, who went on SVT claiming that they defended their decision to include Israel, which naturally pissed off even more people. So thanks to all of what happened, we kind of was expecting almost a bit of a worst case scenario in the fact that if Israel did get a lot of jury results as well as the subsequent, massive televote score that they did eventually get in the end, potentially we would have headed to perhaps Jerusalem or Tel Aviv next year, which previously wouldn't have been bad, but this year, oh boy, it would have been disastrous for everybody involved. Thankfully, though, the jurors in more or less, certainly a good half of the jurors tanked Israel in their jury scores, and thankfully we got a fair and transparent result in the end. So congratulations first of all go to Switzerland, although I will of course mention them in a later video regarding the analysis of how it all transpired. And I've done that with Damo, so even better. In fact, even more relief was the fact that Israel did not win the televote. Thankfully, that was Rim Tim Taggy Dim for Croatia, performed by Baby Lasagna, that just about squeaked ahead in the televote. Had Israel topped the televote? Boy, oh boy, we wouldn't hear the end of it. And yeah, not gonna lie, the massive televote score that Israel got simply just does not justify on how the levels of that particular song is like. If you're asking me, I was expecting probably 40 or 50 going into the competition. The fact that they got 300 plus just screams of absolute almost doping in terms of trying to get people to vote for them. Although that being said, they did genuinely get a lot of telephone votes. It was just from people that didn't actually watch the Eurovision Song Contest. Case in point, the Israeli advertising agency spent on average, or roughly, $1.5 million in advertising just to make sure that Israel got a lot of telephone votes. So where does this all go? Where do we all lead in regards to this going forward with the Eurovision Song Contest? Because boy oh boy, we all love it as a collective community, and we all want it to strive, survive, and carry on for many great years that we know the Eurovision Song Contest, and more to the point, the EBU is capable of. Every single one of those people that made those decisions that they did on behalf of the European Broadcasting Union, first of all, should absolutely resign. Including that of Martin Osterdahl, even though I did feel a kind of almost a little bit of sympathy for him again, almost. But yeah, absolutely, Martin's position is untenable, that current guy's untenable, every single one of their positions in the EBU is, quite frankly, untenable. And touching back what I said about the start in regards to Russia's participation, bringing the contest in disrepute, boy oh boy, did EBU's inclusion of Israel bring the contest into disrepute. As for the Netherlands, well, I hope a resolution can be brought about with the EBU and Avrotros, the Dutch broadcaster, for next year's contest, because boy oh boy, they need a massive apology in regards to this. Although I should stress at this point, we don't know the full extent as to what US did. we only have to wait for the police investigation to come out to signify what actually happened. But yeah, moving forward, I am not going to even remotely include Israel in the Eurovision Song Contest in the future. I'll still acknowledge it as far as this year is concerned, because at the end of the day, I feel like I'm kind of obliged to do so since I kind of did include them to begin with. But I do have to give massive apologies to the community for doing so. And in future, Israel are not going to feature on this particular channel again. So yeah, that was the absolute carnage crap show that was the Eurovision Song Contest this year. Oh, and by the way, as an added bonus in regards to Martin Osterdahl, this little interval act was also featured.
That one didn't age quite so well.
And that about does it for this particular video on my thoughts in regards to Israel in the Eurovision Song Contest. I hope you will enjoy watching it and running through the absolute chaotic mess that was the 2024 competition with Israel in it. But never mind what I think, please do let me know what you think in the comments below. Should Israel allow to be participating next year, or do you think they should be banned altogether? Let me know your thoughts. Otherwise, you know the drill by now. Subscribe for more of my Eurovision juicy goodness. Smash the like button on this video for good measure, and of course, ring the bell to get notified about my latest videos. I'll catch you again in the next one, where hopefully it'll be a lot brighter and a lot happier. Although on a side note, well done to the SVT for another good productive show. In fact, the production was brilliant, if you ask me. So yeah, catch you in the next one. Bye bye, everybody. Bye bye.